Welcome back. In this video, we're going to do about the chaining methods. Okay. So we have been using the map, filter and reduce methods in isolation. However, we can take this one step further by the chaining all these methods one after another. For example, let's say we wanted to take all the movement deposits and then convert them up into the euros to dollar, and finally add them all, so we know exactly how much was deposited into the US dollar. Okay, so we could of course do each of these operations individually and store the result in new variable. However, we can also do it in all in one go, so let's do that. So I'll start here with the filter method. As I said, we want to take all of the deposits, right? So these deposits for now. Okay, so here movements dot filter. Here we'll just say move using the arrow function here, and then here we want our move, which is here the condition, Okay, so here again we then get a movement, and now we want to convert the movement to a US dollar, so we can do that with the variable that we used before, which is here the constant euro to USD, which is the conversion rate 1.1 here, so we'll use that here. Okay, so here here will be the result of this operation will be a new array, so that we can now map on the array. So we'll do the mapping here. So map move. So with this, we converted all of the deposits into the US dollar, and but now we can take this even further on the result. So we can call reduce, and of course we could also call the some more filters or more maps, but now let's do reduce. To do that, we add all of these values which we have in this movements. Okay, so let's add up all of these values in the movement so together, and we know how that works. So we use the accumulator here, and then the current movement, and then we need the return accumulator, okay, plus the current movement. So for that, we are using the reduce method. So let me just write it down here, reduce of so here we need the accumulator and then movement. So if you remember this from the previous lecture, you will get it. So let's now store this in the constant. So here let me just say constant total deposits USD equals to this we are setting here. So this, let me just save it. Okay, so this is the deposits that we did into our account in the US dollar. So as I mentioned, we could of course chain many other methods here as well, as long as they return a new array. So filter returns here the new array. Okay, so we could have added something else here, or the same goes for the map, but reduce, for example, we'll return a value, so only this number in this case. So of course here we could now not have chained a map or a filter after this, so we can only chain a method after one another. So in the first one returns an array, so you can imagine all of this as a sort of pipeline that process our data. So we put data in the at the beginning, which is here as which is here as you can see here, and then it goes through all these steps in these cases. So these three steps here, and then in the end our input data comes out processed on the other side of the pipeline. So let me just write it here, pipeline. We can chain all these three methods together it can be a little bit too hard to debug if one of the result is not what we expected. For example, if the result here would be something else weird, we wouldn't really know from which step of this pipeline it would come from, right? So to solve this, it will be good to check out these arrays in these three different steps. So let's say we did a mistake here in the filter method, which is the move here. For suppose, let me just say here we did this mistake here. And so our result would come out negative, and that would be strange. So let me just show you here console.log total deposits. As you can see here, we got our negative value. So our result here would be the negative. So that would be strange. In this case, it is probably be nice to know the result of the filter operation. So we can do that by using the array parameter that we get access in the callback function, remember. So we have the current elements, the index, and then the entire array. Okay. So we'll just keep this map here as it was, and then let me just turn it off and then rewrite it here with the map function here. So here with the map, current element in index, and then the entire, right? So which is this. Okay. And then here we are setting this to. Here we use the curly braces. So here we'll just say console.log array. So you see that indeed here we get the three negative movements here right now. So that is the result of this filter here. Okay. And so again, if we want to see the result of only this operation, we can check out the current array and then the next array method. So that has chained on the filter. So in this case, it's map. So it is one of the great use cases of having of this current array, because you see, of course, the array has to be the result of the previous operation of this filter. So it is not the initial movement array, because that's not what we call the map method, right? So the map method was called on the result of movement, that filter. Therefore it is the value here of this array that makes sense. Now it was of course logged here the three times, because the callback function here is called three times. So one for each of these three values. So let me just put here this back to original. Then you can see here it returned 5 times here, because there are 5 values in the array. So let's just turn this here off as well, this one console.log. And so this was just to show you that we can inspect the current array at any stage of the pipeline using the third parameter of the callback function. All right. And so now that we know this chaining works, we can go back to our application here above. Okay. So here we'll just write our code here now. We can now calculate these statistics down here, so that all of the deposits, so income here basically, then we have the outcome as you can see here. So as you can see here, right, so here we have the income, outcome and interest, right? So this here we are going to change that. Okay. So here from the input values which we are getting here, okay, these all deposits here should be in the total income, and all the negative withdrawals here should be in the out, and then we are going to calculate here the interest. Okay, so the income here basically, which is here, so here which is here the labeled here as, so this income, if you just go ahead and inspect this, and as you see here the class summary values of value in, as you can see here I have already declared here, which is in the label sum in. Similarly for this out, here it is the label sum out, and similarly for interest, it is here label sum interest. So in some time we are going to use that here. So right now we'll just write the code for here. Okay, so here let me just say constant cal display summary. Okay, so here we are setting this into the function of movements. If you remember above, we have here the movements, right? And then Here we'll just declare the constant incomes equals to movements dot filter. So here we are simply using what we just created down here, right? So for the total income value and then the negative values here we got it, right? So for that we are just simply writing that here. So similarly as we have written down here, the same code here goes as well. Okay, here and then here we'll just reduce. See here we got our value here, right? And now here we'll just simply write calculate display summary of. Here initially we are using the account one to just check. Later we'll just change this into the all accounts. So here we are just using the one account number one. So later we'll use for whichever the user logins. Okay. So after we just save this, and now we can put it here inside this label of this HTML element here. Okay, so it is always a good idea to check out the name as we have already show you, as I have already show you, which is here in this case constant label sum in here, which is for this in. Okay, so let me just copy this here, label sum in, and then here I'm going to write the code here for that. Some label in dot text content. Here we are just setting the inside the text content, which here I want to be the incomes. Okay, and then here I want to, so here I'm using simply euro, and then let me just copy this, and then here instead of euro as well I'm just putting here euro. And then so here after when we get these deposits here, we want here also to be euro, right? So for that here we'll just add. So here we are going to paste that here so that we'll get the output. So when we just run it, see here, here we got the euro symbol, and here we got our euro symbol as well. And then if you can see here our total balance here also in here we got the euro symbol. Okay, as you can see here right now our total here we got the value which was deposited here, we got the value here. Okay, now let's just write this for out here, so which is here this label sum out. So if you know how to write that, take it as a challenge here and then write that here. So let me just declare here constant out, and then as we have already written here previously, I shown you here how we got our how we calculated for the negative value total here. So the same function here which goes here. So let me just copy all this, and then let me just paste it here. And then here instead of movement here, which is this one, we want only the negative values here, right? So and also here we want here the out. Okay, and also here we need to make one more change, which is not sum out. Here we want to change the sum not in, here it is the sum out. So when we run this, as you can see here we got our value here which is in the negative. Okay, now we don't want this minus symbol, so how do we remove that? So we just simply go here and then add.abs of out. Then as you can see here the negative value was removed here. So with that we are done here with the out. So similarly let's just create here for the interest as well. So let's say that the banks pay out an interest each time there is a deposit to the bank account, and then the interest is 1.2% of the deposited amount. So as I said, the interest is paid on each deposit. So the first we need to get these deposits and then filter here, and then let me just copy, let me just write down here constant interest, and then let me just copy out here the interest which is the filter here. Okay, so we got the deposits filter here. So now on each of these deposits we will receive 1.2%. So what do we do here? Well, we are going to create a new array which contains all of these interest. So in the end we can just add them together. So map is the way to go here. So we'll just write here the map. So here we'll just say map deposit, and then here we'll just say deposit into here 1.2, right? And then here we want to convert them into percentage, right? So by 100, and then so here we reduce. So we'll do the same thing which we did here before. So but here before we use the move, so here we don't want, so here we want the interest to be coming out in the new array, right? So for that here interest in the short form I have written int. Okay, okay, and also here similarly for this label sum out and then the label sum in. So what we'll just do here is just copy this here, and then here we'll just paste it here instead of label in. So here we'll just say label sum interest, and then here we'll just put interest. Okay, when we save this, as you can see here, the interest which we got here, the value here total is 60.24 euros. So which is the correct value here we just got here. And now this works great. Let's say some banks introduce a new rule so that the banks only pays an interest if the interest is at least €1. So where we put that in the calculation. So again, if one interest is at least one only, then it will be added to the total. So that's got to be somewhere between this place where we actually calculate the individual interest, right? Okay. So here where we add them together. So let's just add here a new method in the chain between the map and reduce. Here we'll just add. So it's going to be the filter because we basically want to exclude the interest that are below 1. So the one here is of the array's interest. So let's actually take a look at here at the current array here. So interest of the whole array. So let's just log that to the console, the whole array. So let's just see what's happening. Anyway, what we'll have to do here is to filter the result of culling these results. So what we have to do here is to filter the results of culling these interests here for values that are at least 1. So interest greater or equal 1, only the interest will make it so into the final calculation. So in the next step here of the pipeline here, which is the reduce. Okay, let me just write here dot filter. Here we are going to filter out, right? And then here we'll just say interest and then current value and then the array. So here we are doing the arrow function, and then here we are using the console.log. So let me just show for the okay, and then here what we'll do is return. So when the interest here we are setting the constraint which is greater or equal to 1 only, then proceeds, right? Okay, so when we run this, yeah, here, okay, as you can see here in our array here we have total of 5 elements here. So less than one value here we are having only 0.84. So basically in here written, so which is below this here one, we are just removing this 0.84. So here our total interest rate, then here it is going to be the 59.4 euros. So if we include with the total here with the 5 elements without this filter, so previously here we got 60 point change euros. Okay, that's how we just use the filter element to remove the interest rate below below 1. Okay, which is here the 0.84. That's how we did this, and this works perfectly fine here. So anyway, this was another great part here of our banker application. And now just to finish this lecture, let me give you a couple of remarks about chaining. So first, we should not overuse chaining. So we should try to optimize it, because chaining tons of methods one after the another can cause a real performance issues. So if we have a huge array, so if we have a huge chain of methods chained one after the other, we should try to compress all the functionality that they do into as little as possible. For example, sometimes we create way more map methods than we actually need. So we could just do all that one map call. So when you chain methods like this, when keep looking for opportunities of keeping up your code performance. Second, it is a bad practice in JavaScript to chain methods that mutate the underlying original array. For example, the splice method. So again, you should not chain a method like a splice or the reverse method. I mean, you can do that for a small application like this one, which we did here, and it's not a big deal, it's not going to cause a problem. But in larger scale applications, it's usually a good practice to avoid mutating arrays, and we'll come back to this when we talk a little bit more about functional programming. Okay, that's it for this video.